On today's show, how have the Houston Rockets looked so far defensively this season? What are the biggest concerns about the defense so far? We're going to dive into the numbers and take a look at Amen Thompson juggling both his on and off ball role this year. It's all coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What is up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Fridays. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets, where the best way you can help us grow our show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing, and then like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. Now, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to use all across the app. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you so much for being an everydayer. And joining us now is your weekly co-host, the host of the B Block podcast and Sports Radio 610's Brandon Scott, who you can track down on IG at B Scott from Hiram Clark. Brandon, we are now 4 games into this Rockets season. A little bumpy start, 0-2, Thunder then Pistons, picking things back up against the Nets and Raptors. So sitting at 500 now. Still some questions about this team. And one of those questions, one of the biggest questions about this team, something that maybe some people saw coming into this season. I'll give you a chance to maybe toot your own horn here in a moment. But, you know, this Rockets team doesn't quite feel the same defensively as they have the past couple seasons under the stewardship of Ime Udoka. And that's what we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about on today's show, is kind of getting into, you know, how do we feel about the Rockets defense so far? How concerned should we be? And then we're going to dive into some of the numbers to actually see what has been hurting the Rockets the most defensively through these first 4 games. We're not going to be super overreactionary, right? It's 4 games in. You know, not enough of a sample size. We like to do those benchmarks around like 10 games or so is probably a good, healthy sample size of like, okay, what is this team offensively, defensively? But we're going to work with what we got. So how are you feeling right now, B. Scott, about where the Rockets defense is at currently these handful of games in?
Yeah, if I'm going to break it down, like even game by game, Jackson, I think about how I haven't loved the defense really at any point. Maybe there's been stretches where it's been really good. But if we go game by game, I don't know if I've really liked the defense or felt good about the defense since the opener, right? Like against Detroit, I thought they got outworked, right? And then they've won these last couple of games, but I didn't think it was necessarily because the defense was so great. Against the Nets, I thought the Nets I'll credit the Nets that I thought they made some pretty difficult shots, some contested shots, especially from 3. But it was also really them not being good enough, I thought, on closeouts. I thought they let Michael Porter Jr. do way too much early in that game. I know Michael Porter Jr. is a really good basketball player, but I have thought that their defense has left a lot to be desired going back to or ever since the first game. And maybe even I was making some excuses for the first game because they were going against the champs, opening night, ring ceremony banner, all of that, SGA's out there. I get it. But I haven't felt great. The only thing that I felt really good about defensively for the Rockets right now is their length, which is something that you can't teach. It's not something that's going to improve or get worse because they are however tall they are. And Kevin Durant, which I guess is an extension of the length part, but I think he's been, for the most part, exceptional defensively. So I would say their length has me encouraged, and Kevin Durant, even at this ripe old age, getting after it defensively is also very encouraging. But overall, as a team, it has left a lot to be desired, man, if I'm being honest about it.
We're going to have to start like a drinking game here at LOR where it's like every time we talk about KD's age that you got to take a shot or something. Not if you're driving. Don't do that if you're on the way to work, please. But like, actually, though, I mean, I feel like it's just going to be a talking point like every episode. Oh, KD's.
But you know what? When we talk about defense, though, I think it's a fair point to bring up. Like, there's no reason to talk about his age when we discuss his offensive game, because that has shown no signs of aging. You would figure, though, somebody with as many miles on him as KD has, who's played as much basketball as he has, and then at the age that he is, that maybe either he wouldn't be as good defensively or he wouldn't be as engaged defensively, and neither one of those two things is the case.
No, you're absolutely right there, and it's a great point to bring up. And KD has been arguably the Rockets' best defender this whole season so far. I will say one thing that has kind of stood out is, and credit to Ime Udoka for kind of making the switch, right? Not that the double big or the jumbo lineups don't work, because they do work, and they're still winning those minutes with the jumbo lineups out there with Steven Adams in particular, right? But there's something that just felt missing in those first couple games from a defensive intensity standpoint that I think that Josh Okogie helps replicate and bring some back of, right? And I think it's really important to remember that, the Rockets have lost a handful, 3/5 of their starting lineup has changed, right? Very, very quickly. They lost Jalen Green, they lost Dillon Brooks, and they lost unexpectedly Fred VanVleet, right? And these were the guys who helped anchor this defense for the past couple years, right? They were, they got to a point where they were communicating very effectively with each other. They understood how to rotate, who does what, people with different tendencies, where to be, how to move on the floor, and all these little things, all these little nuances of how to defend, how you're closing it on certain guys, how you're shading certain guys on the floor, different overall defensive principles. Those guys were a locked in cohesive unit. And that's why we saw them go from the 10th best defense that first year with Ime to top 5 last season. And we were kind of expecting them to continue to build on it this year. But I think what we're learning, through preseason and these first 4 games of the regular season, it's really hard to just throw 5 new guys on the floor together and expect them to be a cohesive unit immediately, especially on the defensive end. And so I've been impressed with KD's defense. Surprisingly, I've been a little disappointed in Amen Thompson's defense. He still has moments where he looks, locks in and looks like the the Terror Twin that we know and love. But I wonder too how much of his newfound role, the on-ball effects of bringing the ball up the court every possession and being utilized so much more as a primary ball handler, is wearing on him to where he's not able to exert the same level of intensity as the Rockets go-to defensive ace, defensive stopper like he used to be able to do. And that's certainly maybe a bit of an underrated kind of storyline thing to pay attention to this season, and certainly something that we'll be talking about, at least sort of in relation to that later on when we talk about Amen kind of balancing that on versus off ball role that he has this season.
Yeah, this is the part that I don't think I gave enough credit to. When we're watching the preseason and breaking it down, and then we're doing our ahead of the season predictions of what we expect the team to look like, where they might get better, where they might struggle, what's going to be the difference between this team and last year. I unfortunately did not get to join our roundtable episode with you and the rest of the crew, but this was going to be one of the opinions that I was going to have, was that they'd rank much higher than they did before offensively, but they would take a little bit of a drop off defensively. But I did think that the offense would more or less compensate for whatever they were going to lack or whatever they were going to drop off defensively. That's how I saw this thing playing out. I didn't necessarily see it looking like this. It is, I would just call it mildly concerning, because we just haven't gotten far enough into the season and seen enough of it yet. But it doesn't make you feel good when you've gotten used to the Rockets being one of the better defensive teams in the NBA, and 4 games in, they are decidedly not. But the thing that I did not give enough credit for was what you just talked about there at the end, was I thought just based off of the personnel, their offense would be better and their defense could take a step back. I did not think enough about the Amen factor of more on ball, more ball handling responsibilities, higher. I did talk about the higher usage, but just the higher emphasis on him on the offensive end of the floor. I did not take enough or take into account quite enough what that might do or how that might affect his legs, his focus, whatever the actual thing is on the other end of the floor. I don't think I gave enough credit for that, and we are seeing a little bit of it. Not so much to where it's super concerning or we got to raise the super red flags or anything like that, but it is noticeable at this point.
And that's why having Josh Okogie out there these past couple games has made things feel a little bit better, because now you can have another elite point of attack guy to take some of that pressure off of Amen Thompson, right? To really form the shell of that defense out there on the perimeter. And they've also done a few other things defensively, rather than running man exclusively when they have Steven Adams out there. Last game against the Raptors, they actually ran rather than running zone exclusively when they have the jumbo lineups out there and stuff, they actually had some stretches where they were running man-to-man defense, even with Adams on the floor. And that was encouraging to see kind of Ime experimenting and mixing some things up. And I think that it's important to note here, is that, like, if the Rockets wanted to win every single game at all costs, like right now in the early part of the season, they'd be doing a lot of things differently. Like Kevin Durant would have his fingerprints all over the basketball way more than he already does. Every offensive action would go through Alperen Sengun in some capacity. They'd probably be playing like Aaron Holiday over Reed Shepherd in all actuality, because like Aaron Holiday is still a better player than Reed Shepherd at this current juncture, like because he's a vet, he knows what to do, like these different things. So they're experimenting, right? And they are doing and trying different things to be able to ultimately have a better product, a better team, a better ceiling down the line later in this season. And they're willing to take their lumps a little bit early on while they're kind of trying to figure some of these things out. But coming up, we're going to get into some of the numbers behind the Rockets defense so far through these first 4 games, what's working, what's not working, and what they need to improve on. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Robinhood. Your ambition just met its match. With Robinhood, you play for the win, not just on game day, but every day, locking in on every opening, beating your PR, beating it again. Channel that drive into your money. Robinhood puts you in control of your money. Trade stocks and ETFs, options, futures, and crypto all on one platform. You can now build and execute your own trades from a desktop with Robinhood Legends advanced tools, or take advantage of the new Robinhood strategies with a tailored portfolio managed by a team of experts. You expect more from yourself, expect more from your money. Get started today at robinhood.com/yourmoney. Again, that's robinhood.com/yourmoney. Your money, your move. Today's episode is also brought to you by DoorDash. The NBA season is heating up, and DoorDash has found the perfect way to keep fans in their bag all season long. Whether you're watching for the highlights, your fantasy team, or just for your favorite player, DoorDash makes every game night even better. DoorDash is the official on-demand delivery platform of the NBA, and they're celebrating with something called the Bag Drop. Every time an NBA player scores 50 points in a game, DoorDash drops 50% off your order with Dash Pass the very next day, and you're automatically entered for a chance to win the ultimate fan bag. So next time someone goes off for 50, it was just Austin Reeves the other night, use promo code NBA50 the next day to get 50% off on DoorDash with Dash Pass, plus your shot at the Bag Drop. Dash Pass members only 50% off up to $10 the day after a 50-point game with promo code. Terms apply. No purchase necessary. Ends April 13th. Open to U.S. residents 21 or older. Visit DoorDashInYourBag.com for full details. DoorDash in your bag all season long. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, B. Scott. So this Rockets team, the offense has been better than expected, significantly better than expected through these first 4 games. They are, kid you not, the number 1 offense in the NBA right now. And that's what you get when you have a team as massive as the Rockets that added KD, that is rebounding. I kid you not. They have a 42.9% offensive rebounding percentage. That's tied for number 1 in the entire NBA. They're getting almost half their misses via offensive rebounds. It's nuts. As well as just having better overall shooting percentages with KD and Jabari stepping up and all that. So the offense has been awesome and will hopefully continue to be awesome. If they can be a top 5 offense, that's great. The defense, a little less though, currently sitting at 19th. Actually, I take that back. I guess they just updated this after what game something just finished, and they've either fallen or they've moved. All right, you know what? We're gonna say 19th because I can't even see where they ran off to. Oh, there it is. No, it is 19th. Okay, so 19th, and that's a far cry from where they were last year as 5th. Now, granted, again, you still have some time for these things to shake out. 4 games is a very small sample size, but here's where some of the issues are. I want to ask you on the surface, Brandon. If you were to take a wager as to where the Rockets are bleeding the most points, where they've struggled the most defensively through 4 games, where do you think that is right now?
Just off of watching every second of every game, it's the 3-point line. I would say it was the 3. There was one, I'm trying to remember which game it was, where they didn't rebound as great. I mean, they've been rebounding offensively very well, but they had issues with defensive rebounds. Maybe it was, I'm trying to think if it was the Pistons game or the Nets game. There was one game where they didn't rebound satisfactory, but I would say defending the 3 has been the issue that I've noticed just from watching the games.
Defending the 3, certainly, especially against the Nets, it kind of felt like they were a little bit more lackluster about it. I'll give them credit. The Raptors they just shot the lights out of the ball. Like there were maybe some moments where you could argue, okay, they missed a closeout or left a couple guys too wide open. Like they were kind of daring Scotty to shoot, and Scotty was like, all right, bet, and kept draining threes to start the game. the number one area that they have been bleeding the most points so far, and at least it doesn't break it down this like granularly, but transition has been their worst area of defense so far. Like they are giving up way too many points in transition. They've given up 101 points in transition so far. That is good they're giving up 1.278 points per possession in transition. That's abysmal. That would rank, that's the 13th percentile in the NBA right now, B. Scott. And again, higher percentile better, lower percentile bad. And so the Rockets do not want to be 13th percentile for guarding in transition. Their transition defense has been abysmal. And a big part of that stems from those first two games in particular against the Thunder, against the Pistons, where when you have those jumbo lineups out there, the Rockets, despite all their length, all their size, all their muscle, they are a bit slower and susceptible to being picked apart in transition. And that's why I feel like the Rockets, after those first two games, looked at that jumbo lineup and they were like, we can use this, but situationally. We can't do this full time, at least not against certain teams. And that's where enter Josh Okogie, and then things started ticking up in the better direction defensively.
Yeah, so that doesn't surprise me. I noticed the same thing. I would even say that like it's one of those gift and curse. Like I would expect their half court defense to be a lot. Like when I watch the double big, the jumbo lineup, if you will, I'm like, man, they're so damn tall. Look at those passing lanes. Look at those arms. Look at that length. It's such a problem. But the downside of that is when it is time to rip and run, when it is time to get up and go, they don't necessarily have the horses to do it. So that part, maybe I should have been able to predict that, because that has also been noticeable. But at the same time, it is a little bit surprising because of the athletes that they have, and it has to do with, again, the lineups that they run out there in the earlier games. But I would expect that to improve. We've already seen, I'll give them credit, like you mentioned, the Josh Okogie adjustment. They've already noticed it and made an adjustment that was in kind. So that's a good thing to see, a good thing for Rockets fans. If you are watching Ime Udoka and trying to evaluate how observant is he? Like how much are they noticing the things that are ailing them? They definitely noticed that and made the adjustment. So yeah, but I would still point out that at times the 3-point defense has not looked great.
Yeah.
But in both fashions, I would say both the 3-point defense because of their length in the half court, and then the transition defense because of their overall athleticism as a team. Both things I would expect to improve or get better sooner rather than later.
For sure. And just comparatively to last season, a couple things to point out here. Just their overall, because they do, it's a decent mix between running man-to-man and then running zone. So far this year, they are in the 60th percentile on their man-to-man defense. They're giving up 0.971 points per possession on that, which is not terrible. It's slightly above that, slightly, better than average. They're giving up exactly 1 point per possession when they're running their zone defense, which is good enough for 43rd percentile, which is not great. Last season, they were 87th percentile in both of those categories defensively. And so they were like near tops of the league in man-to-man defense and their zone defense, whereas so far this season, their man defense has been better than the zone defense. They've been bleeding some points out on the zone. And I do wonder how much of that is, again, just because the Rockets don't run this tradition. They don't run like a traditional 2-3 zone or 3-2 zone, or like even I guess they really haven't done like any like box and one kind of stuff this season yet. But like their zone is so non-traditional in how they move around, how the guys are flying from side to side of the court. And you're not just responsible for your little quadrant in a traditional zone. And that's really tough for new guys to learn, right? Like the Rockets had time at the end of last season, and ahead of the playoffs, and they got 7 games worth of playoff caliber experience running that very unique zone together. And it worked. And it was fantastic against the Warriors. And it was fantastic against almost every team that they played against. But trying to integrate so many new pieces, trying to figure out, okay, well, how does Reed fit into the zone? Where does Josh go? How does KD factor in? And trying to get those guys on the same page as other guys, and doing all this without a couple of your most important vocal defensive leaders in Dillon Brooks and Fred VanVleet, who are now missing. Like, it's a lot to ask a very young team to be able to kind of figure out all of this on the fly. And so I think that through 4 games, I think we can be disappointed in the defense, but I think it's also important to kind of contextualize, hey, these are some of the reasons that they're struggling. But like you alluded to earlier, they have the talent to be a very dominant defensive team. And it's ultimately going to shake out or come down to kind of, just getting the reps in, some of the communication and stuff. But then, maybe because of this newfound offensive identity, they're a little bit, I guess I don't say okay with being worse defensively, but just maybe if more of their effort is being expended on the offensive end because they're doing some new things, because they're continuing to crash the offensive glass, because they're running some more complicated sets, right, where there's more motion offensively, they're cutting more, they're playing off LP a lot more offensively than they have in years past. Maybe those are things that are going to tax this team a little bit more to where they're not going to be quite as effective defensively.
I'd say this, though. I'm actually okay with that as long as it's not like the defense can't fall off of a cliff. But I am okay with this attrition or with the distribution of what they do well, right? Like if it means the sacrifice defensively means they're going to be one of the better offenses in basketball, which I think we did anticipate that they would be a lot better. I don't know about number 1, but if that's what the sacrifice is, I'll take it. It just cannot fall off to that degree. And I also want to point out, since we have mentioned Dillon Brooks a couple of times, I do think that with the excitement of acquiring Kevin Durant, with the excitement of the ascension of Amen Thompson, who was all NBA defense last year, and then with sort of just the shock of Fred VanVleet going out, all of these different moves and like the focus of the team, I think a lot of people have kind of underrated or downplayed the importance of a Dillon Brooks on the defense. And I know he's not necessarily the same defender that he was earlier on in his career, but I do feel like that was sort of an underrated loss for the Rockets is, Fred VanVleet, a lot of it is the point guard stuff and not as much of the defense, which I think you and I have talked about at various points. And folks that really kind of pay attention to these parts of the game have talked about it as well. But it's easy to sort of overlook. But that and Dillon Brooks being gone are both like tremendous changes to their defensive identity, and they're just going to have to find it. And I think that they will. And again, I'll take better offense if it means slightly worse defense, but not 19th, and certainly not those numbers that you rattled off about how they are in man and zone.
Yeah, we're going to be doing some check-ins, and around 10 games or so is when we're going to have like a better idea of what this team looks like, a more kind of cohesive picture, across a 10-game sample size. And by then, if they're not up in like, ideally, you want to still top 10 in both offense, defense is where you want to be. That's the bread and butter for any team that considers themselves a viable, legitimate contender. You want to be top 10 offense, top 10 defense. Doesn't matter which is which. Maybe some people prefer a more, defensive oriented team, more offensive oriented approach, whatever it is. If the Rockets can squeeze themselves into the top 10, which, I mean, they're already the number 1 best offense in the NBA. So like that, they're not even talking about squeaking into the top 10. They are far and away the best offense in the NBA. But if they can maintain that and then just get the defense up to a level where it's passable, where it's back in that top 10 range, they could fall all the way from 5th to 9th or even the 10th defense if they keep the offense as potent as it's been through these first 4 games. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. That balance is going to be interesting to watch them try and strike throughout this season ultimately. And we'll have more check-ins and kind of monitoring where those efficiency numbers ultimately land. But coming up, we're going to talk a little bit about Amen Thompson and his kind of 2 roles this season, both on ball and off ball, how we feel about how he's progressing through the early part of this season. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every single game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. But hey, maybe you don't want to get into player props or individual player odds, any of that stuff, right? You can just keep things simple. Take a look at the odds on favorites to win the finals this season. Right now, the Thunder favorites to repeat at plus 200. The Nuggets and Cavaliers behind them at plus 700 apiece. You got the Knicks at plus 1,200 and the Warriors sitting at plus 1,400, rounding out the top five. Don't you worry, Rockets are going to be in that conversation sooner rather than later. But right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, B. Scott, let's shift gears to Amen Thompson here to round out the show. And we kind of teased this up in our last episode, recapping the Raptors or the win against the Raptors with our other weekly co-host Madison. But Amen is in such a unique position, right? Because obviously, the Rockets, now they need him to be more of a primary ball handler in the absence of Fred VanVleet, but he's also just so incredibly gifted playing off the ball, and he's got such an incredible chemistry playing in conjunction with Alperen Sengun, playing off of him, right? The little backdoor cuts and the off-ball actions that we see out of him, that it's really tough that you're almost, in a weird way, it's almost like you're robbing the Rockets of one of their best weapons, one of their best players, by turning Amen Thompson, the off-ball player, into Amen Thompson, the on-ball presence. And that's like a sacrifice, kind of back to what I was saying in segment one, right? Like, that's a sacrifice that they're willing to make here in the short term, even if it looks clunky, even if it looks a little messy at times, because they want the long-term fruits of that development and that growth when they can eventually see Amen Thompson as a truly better, more potent on-ball player. How do you feel about so far how the Rockets are kind of balancing that, how Amen has looked in both roles, and kind of, just your thoughts on Amen in general to start this season?
Well, as far as how the team is balancing, I think that they're doing the best that they can. Like, they're kind of forced into the situation. So I don't really have much gripe with the team. I do have an analogy that I feel like you'll appreciate as a gamer, and I'm not a gamer, to be clear, but I am a superhero guy. And so, like, for me, this is the way I look at Amen Thompson and the on-ball versus off-ball thing. Okay, you tell me if you can vibe with this, and I'm curious what the audience will think.
Okay,
to me, Amen Thompson off-ball is Spider-Man already. Like, he's Spider-Man. He knows his powers. Amen Thompson on-ball is Miles Morales before he's figured it out. Like, when Miles Morales is trying to figure out how to use his powers, he's got the powers, but he doesn't know how to use them yet. And like, it's just not there yet. So he is early Miles Morales on ball, and he is full on Superman off ball. But as we know, Miles Morales figures it out eventually. And I think that Amen Thompson too is going to figure things out eventually on ball. I am fascinated by the on-ball experiment. We know that Amen has talked about like having point guard roots or background and loving that role. I think he's just got to get used to playing it at this level with this level of regularity, if that makes sense. So playing it in the NBA, right? He's a point guard before he got to the NBA, but new to point guard in the NBA, and also new to playing it this much. Like, they might have had him, handle the ball here and there a little bit in his first couple of years, but this is just a different ball game. So I think it's just sort of a natural adjustment or progression, or even growing pains, if you will, on ball. But at times, though, when he's on ball, I want to say I even brought this up last week, where in the opener against the Thunder, where he's got the ball, takes it all the way the length of the court and right into a guy's chest. And, it's like, oh, well, you want to pressure Amen Thompson 3/4 court? Well, he's actually pretty amazing still, and can still make something happen against you. Now, doing it the entire game, that was just one play that I'm talking about, right? Doing it the entire game is a whole nother different thing. It does not look great necessarily on ball, but I don't think it looks terrible. I would agree with your initial point, though. Amen Thompson off ball, going back to my analogy about Spider-Man, he's a superhero. So if you've got an offensive hub in Sengun, and I much just rather see Sengun passing the ball to Amen Thompson than to see Amen Thompson passing the ball to anybody else. But hey, that's just me. And they are going to, I think this is the most important point. They need him to get better in that regard. So regardless of what we have to say about it, it doesn't, like, it can't be, I'll say this, it's got to get better. period. Like that's just there are no other options. When we'll break it down, see what the numbers look like, but he's got to get better there.
Yeah, and I think too, this is where you maybe start to even see kind of the vision that like Rafael Stone and Ime kind of had with some of their roster moves and some of the decisions being made, because you mentioned, having, a passing big like Alperen Sengun, right? The shin hub offense and playing through him heavily and all that. And kind of they're balancing, the offense between, okay, how much do we run through LP? How much is the ball in KD's hands? And how much are we letting Amen Thompson kind of, grow his game and spread his wings and try to do a little bit? I think that when you start to look at like the blueprint for this team somewhere down the line, ideally, like if you have a guy like a Reed Shepherd type who can handle the basketball, who can facilitate, who can be more of that kind of almost more traditional point guard, but also still has an ability to play off ball, to be a catch and shoot threat, that kind of thing. Those skill sets between Sengun and Amen Thompson and Reed Shepherd are all so very complementary of one another that you can imagine, assuming we know that Sengun and Amen they're destined for stardom. Like I think we feel safe in assuming that and saying that right now, if not already, like in Alp's case, already a star. Yes. But for Reed Shepherd, not even necessarily that Reed's going to be a future star, but just even if he's just a starting level player at some point in his career, right? His skill set, being able to be a guard that can set the table, and then you play through Sengun, but then you also afford Amen Thompson that luxury of being able to be off ball without sacrificing your lead guard and that security that your lead guard is supposed to provide in those crucial moments at the end of a game. And that's where you can see kind of that blueprint that they thought they were going to have with Fred VanVleet as the lead guard and the floor general and steering the ship. And then, still giving Amen more reps, right? Taking over some of those Jalen Green offensive reps and letting him still have chances to attack and run the show and all that, while Fred plays off ball, because Fred is a guy that can play on or off ball very effectively, right? That's one of the unique things about why they brought him to Houston in the first place. Instead of bringing James Harden back to town for a reunion there, where James was going to dominate the ball for 90% of every, the possessions over the course of the game, they got Fred, which allowed Jalen Green to have the ball in his hands and to flourish as a primary ball handler, as an initiator, and grow his game in that regard. So I think you see a lot of similarities in how Fred plays and how Reed Shepherd projects to be able to play. And even in some flashes so far this season, Reed's done some very impressive things. I think that when you start to dig into the numbers, it's not that any of them are like crazy discouraging. It's just that and again, small sample size. I keep having to throw that anecdote out there. But for example, Amen Thompson is scoring 2 points per possession on cuts right now. That's nuts. So it's only 14 total points. It's only 7 possessions. But when he cuts, good things happen. And he's so it's just, even just the IQ, the ability to know how to float, finding those open seams in the defense, and that chemistry with Alperen Sengun. When Alp feels a double team coming, Amen Thompson is second to none on this Rockets roster about finding the opening so that Alp can deliver him a pass on the money, and then he finishes it right there at the rim with no problem, right? Or draws a foul and gets to the free throw line. And those are the moments that I think, first off, in those first 2 games with starting the jumbo lineup and everything, I think what we saw and why Amen Thompson took 7 threes against the Thunder is because the spacing was all over the place. Unfortunately, if you have Steven Adams in the dunker spot, that takes away Amen Thompson being in the dunker, which he's so lethal doing, right? As a cutter, playing that off-ball role, you stick him in the corner, and then suddenly Amen Thompson has to be your release valve for some of those offensive actions where you're generating all that attention through KD or through Sengun, what have you. And so I like that change up by Ime, and even further down the line, once DFS is healthy, which we haven't gotten an official update or anything yet on DFS, unfortunately, other than he was a little bit behind Jayshawn Tate as far as the rehabilitation process goes. And Tate just played his first game the other night. So hopefully DFS, knock on wood, is not too far away from rejoining the team and getting back to, or being able to make his debut, I guess, for this team. Couple of the other numbers outside of just the cutting for Amen Thompson, as a pick and roll ball handler, which he's spent about 26% of his possessions offensively have come as a pick and roll ball handler so far this season, which is the most of any play type so far. Rockets are only scoring 0.824 points per possession with him as the pick and roll ball handler. And that's not great, unfortunately. That's slightly below average, not quite where you want to be. And in part, that's not also just an Amen thing. That's also him learning and figuring out running pick and roll with Sengun, running it with Adams, running it with Clint Capela, or even Kevin Durant, right? Like, whoever his role man is, whoever his screening partner is, understanding their tendencies, where they like the ball, how they like passes being fed to them, all that stuff. And these are things that ultimately you have to do them to be able to build up those reps and get better at it. And I think we're in the same boat here. It's better that the Rockets try and make those mistakes early in the season, right? And iron these things out early rather than trying to get to it later on, when they're actually fighting for playoff seeding or, hell, in a playoff series, right? They're taking their lumps right now so that they can make Amen a better player down the line.
Yeah. In a perfect world for me, the pick and rolls are going to be Kevin Durant and Reed Shepherd centric with, obviously with, ideally with Alperen Sengun. In a perfect world, that's the pick and roll offense. And then to me, like,
don't sleep on the Clint Capela Reed Shepherd pick and roll. They already had a couple of connections.
Sure. And I have not even mentioned Clint Capela, but yeah, no, like Clint is still able to get up, still a lob threat in that way. But my point being, though, I'm okay with, like, if it's just me, okay, and the team has to operate differently. But if it's just me, I'm okay with like minimal Amen Thompson pick and rolls. And I also feel like the stat that you just put out there, which I had not seen or heard yet, about how good he is at,
as a pick and roll ball handler.
No. The pick and roll ball handling was bad. The stat before that about the cutting. Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know why the word cutting wouldn't come to mind. But the thing that I was thinking about the whole time was I love nothing more almost than watching that dude roam the baseline. Like, there's nobody on the team that you'd rather watch go from sideline to sideline, like through the baseline. And to me, it is the argument against the jumbo lineup. Like what you've mentioned out there about the spacing being weird and how Steven Adams kind of occupies that space that Amen Thompson could be roaming. As much as I love to watch the double big lineup, and as much as I love the length that it provides for them, and just how it kind of just mucks the game up, I think, for the opposition, that is Amen Thompson able to roam the baseline and having those cutting opportunities, to me, is much more of a threat for you than I think anything that Steven Adams can bring, except maybe the offensive rebound. I should probably think about that as well. The fact that he just eats up offensive boards, that is another point that goes against the point that I'm trying to make here. But the point is, I like Amen Thompson in that role and prefer to see it. But again, as I mentioned earlier, they have kind of been forced into making him, trial by fire, so to speak.
And that's the crazy thing is, like, weirdly enough, the only reason that it wouldn't or didn't work early on, or in that first game, especially against the Thunder, is in part because, like, you had Amen as either the primary ball handler or the release valve sitting in the corner because you had Steven Adams in the dunker spot and Alperen Sengun was your primary screener. Makes sense. You want Sengun to be your primary screener usually. But with Sengun's newfound, like, ability to space the floor and knock down threes at a currently 57% clip. Welcome to the show, Alperen Sengun. You are now a floor spacer, because then you can get away with Steven Adams as your primary screener, with Kevin Durant or Jabari, probably KD, handling the basketball, Alperen Sengun on one of the wings, Jabari on the other wing, and then you can have Amen Thompson in the dunker spot. And so that's the uniqueness of, like, we talked about this in the offseason at some point. Sometimes it all blurs together, but, like, this Rockets team and the ability of one of Sengun or Amen Thompson to develop a reliable outside shot, a reliable three ball, would unlock so much for them offensively. And we are seeing the fruits of that pay off right now in real time with Alperen Sengun and what it's going to allow for them to do offensively from a spacing perspective and doing so many different things. Meanwhile, Amen Thompson, unfortunately, one of those numbers that is also not great. Amen Thompson on spot ups is earning a whopping 0.167 points per possession. That is in the first percentile, B. Scott. That is a 1%. That is pretty abysmal, unfortunately. So they need to limit those Amen Thompson spot up opportunities, unfortunately.
Wait. Has he made a three?
No, he's 0 for from downtown so far, and that's the problem. Like, that's the issue.
I was about to say, man, when you brought up Sengun, the floor spacer, I was gonna say, man, I know we got to wrap up, but I don't know how we made it this far. 35 minutes talking, and we haven't talked in a week. How we made it this far, especially given the fact that we're having this Amen Thompson conversation, and it is discouraging that he's over from distance. But how we have gone this far without talking about Sengun, the floor spacer? I mean, bruh, is this a thing? Is this gonna be a thing?
It's a thing. Is
it a thing? It's a thing.
It's here. This is not a flash in the pan. This is not. I've believed in Sengun as a possible floor spacing big since his rookie year. The mechanics look good. The shot looks good.
Same.
Look, this is where I am. I wish him nothing but the best moving forward. But Steven Silas discouraging Alperen Sengun from taking threes was such an egregious mistake to me, because this young man just needed the confidence to be able to take that three ball and just let it fly. And Ime Udoka talked about confidence in his three ball at the beginning of last season. And we didn't see him take that jump last year because he was very focused, and the Rockets collectively were focused on their defensive identity and growing that side of the basketball and working on that end. And Sengun took significant leaps there. But this past offseason, he focused on the offense. He got his touch back around the rim, and he unlocked a new level of his game with that three ball. It's been absolutely fantastic to see.
Dude, I was right there with you from the beginning of like, man, he's going to become a good shooter. Don't worry about it. It's going to happen. And then, bro, last year I got off the train. I gave up on it. I gave up on it too early. So that's why now, though, and I'm encouraged. And so that's why now I'm encouraged, but I'm also cautiously optimistic, because I already jumped off the train, and so I'm like, okay, is this gonna happen?
It's okay. B Sky, we'll let you back on. All right, you just got to fill out a little Alperen Sengun apology form, and you'll be all right.
I got it.
All right, that's gonna do it for our show today. We want your thoughts on the Rockets' defense so far. How concerned are you about it? What stands out to you about what they have done or have struggled to do defensively so far? And how do you feel about Amen Thompson balancing this on-ball, off-ball kind of roles, or the roles that he has with this team? Let us know your thoughts in the YouTube comments. B Scott, let everybody know where to track you down at.
The B Block Podcast, you can find it anywhere you get your podcast and on YouTube every week. And also Sports Radio 610, doing that every Wednesday at 4:40 and every Friday from 11 to noon. Check us out.
That's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Rockets. As always, thanks so much for checking out the show. Remember, the best way to help us grow the show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing, and then like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.